Dorsey, how are we?
I'm good, thank
We were
you.
just having a bit of a laugh before we started, but that's okay. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Obviously, we've been working together quite a bit recently, and I think it's interesting how we caught up. It almost feels like the universe has dumped you into my life and said, "Here she is. She's going to create havoc, and we're going to start doing some good stuff together." So, yeah, obviously, we met through. I think you might have seen me. I did a podcast with Dean,
Yes.
and you kind of seen through that, and yourself and Millie
Yes.
are working together. You've been working together the last year or so and creating some events, but an amazing event called Man Shift,
Yes.
which I'm very grateful that you brought me on board to be part of. So we've been working together a lot, and I thought, what better time to have a conversation and understand who the hell you are, because we've gone deep, but maybe not as deep as I would like to understand a little bit more about this bonkers person in front of me today. So tell me a little bit about, who was little Dorsey and where did you come from and who kind of made the person in front of me today?
Oh God. Gosh, anyone listening to this who knows me will be like, all right, just buckle in, because I tend to go all around the houses. So I'm going to try my best to condense it and make it as streamlined as possible. So I'm from Manchester. I was raised in quite a conventional household, I'd say, or relatively conventional. My mum and dad split up when I was younger. My dad met my stepdad when I was 3. I've also got a sister who's 5 years older than I am. And I was raised by many different people. And by that, I mean we had a huge northern family. And it really does take a village, and that's what I'm learning now, having 2 little ones. So I was raised by grandparents, aunties, obviously my mum and dad, and my stepdad. And life, I say conventional, but life was always really colourful with my mum. She's absolutely nuts. So I had this life where, you go to school, you come home, you're playing in the street, you don't go in until 10 p.m. It's Manchester, it's summertime. That was just the way we were brought up, and certainly in the 90s. So I'm 41 this year, just to sort of give you a bit of context of when I grew up and what that looked like. But my mum, from the age of 10, took me to my first Mardi Gras. So if we think about what we talk about now in today's world, and we talk about equality and diversity, it wasn't a thing. It was just a given in our house. We didn't use words like that. Respect was just a given, and embracing everybody from different cultures. So much so that a very famous drag queen, Fufu Lamar, would drive up our street to come and pick my mum and stepdad up in his Rolls Royce and get out in this big fur coat, and my mum would match him with her big fur coat. It was nuts. And then my stepdad, who used to do golf every Tuesday, he would socialise. He was a really good human, as was my dad, but he would socialise and do golf with gangsters, and I'm talking about real gangsters. So those that were members of the Quality Street Gang, which was around when the Krays were around. So whilst the Krays were in the south, the Quality Street were in the north. A few other gangsters, I won't obviously mention names, but old school. And it was really quite a bizarre upbringing. And then on weekends, my mum was a hairdresser, so I would walk the grounds of the convent with all the nuns. It was nuts, but it didn't feel nuts. It only, on reflection, I think, wow.
So why we lock straight away? I love it.
Such a lot.
So what was you mentioned about a convent? Why, with nuns in a convent? Did I miss that? What were you doing in a convent with walking with nuns?
So my mum was a hairdresser, so on a Saturday she would go and cut the nuns' hair.
Oh, okay.
And nuns do have their hair cut, by the way, even though it's under their habit. And I'd walk the grounds weekends of the convent. It was amazing. Like, again, all of this on reflection at the time, everything is normal. We'd go to my nana's, my dad's mum, every Sunday. She was 4'5", and she would cook for about 15, 20 of us every Sunday. It was a military operation.
See, a lot of eclectic stuff going on.
Yeah.
And you said your dad was mixing with gangsters?
My stepdad.
Yeah.
He was a really good human. He owned a pub in Middleton, in the north of Manchester. Further down the line, one in the south Manchester, but if we sort of stay where we're at now. yeah, he was such a hard worker, and then on Tuesday he'd do golf. But he was mixing with really. It wasn't like there were people coming into our house at all hours or anything like that. It was a working class family, worked really hard, but just mixing with like gangsters who were also, had a lot of money. And then there was one of them was married to a Maltese princess, and he's a multi.
wow.
Like, it was just, when you talk about it, it doesn't seem like a real life. It seems like something from a storybook, but it was normal. And every Sunday I'd go to my nana's, and everyone adored my nana. Everyone adored her.
And those gangsters you talk about, it's interesting because you talk about you mentioned the word old school then, and it's almost like old school gangsters, and people talk about men, gentlemen and stuff like that. And there is a perception that, old school gangsters, they were gentlemanly. And did you find that when you were younger, they looked after the women and people around them, or?
100%. Like, that's certainly what I could see. They were, at the time, it's not like you're aware that they're gangsters. It's, again, everything's on reflection. One of the Quality Street gang we used to go on holiday with, I'll tell you this because it's quite funny, and I used to talk a lot as a child.
No shit.
Just rub it on all the time. And do you remember I don't know if you ever remember going to Spain, and they were the big Chubba Chub lollies,
Yes.
not the big ones, you had those, but it was a bucket and they had all the little ones in there. Yeah. And I was talking, and he was like, "Oh, she just shut up." Anyway, he went to the bar, bought the whole bucket. He went, "Now go up and eat those." And it was just in a really endearing, funny way. Like, it was, pretty cool.
You felt safe around them.
Always.
So you had an eclectic mix of an upbringing, a lot of different people. That's definitely because obviously you are quite a vibrant, energetic person. You can kind of mix it with anybody. And I'm assuming what I'm seeing already is that upbringing would have given you that because you're interacting with so many different people, very diverse.
Yeah.
Did you, when you look back at your childhood, was it all just really enjoyable times? Is there stuff that you look back on and thought everything was, a lot of people have great upbringings and really enjoy their childhood? And was there any pain in there, or was it all pretty good?
Oh, there was definitely pain in there. And again, not really noticing it at the time. So my mum and stepdad loved each other so much. They were very much in love, but they fought a lot. So they had the business, the pub in Middleton. And John had 2 children from his previous marriage, so my stepbrother and stepsister. And I was the youngest out of, there's 4 of us, obviously, because of my biological sister. But my mum and dad used to fight. So my stepbrother and stepsister lived with their mum, and they were older than I was. My sister was 5 years older than I was. So she was, as we were growing up, either a relatives, my nanas, or she had a boyfriend sort of in those, later teen years, if you like. So I used to hear my mum and stepfather, sorry about this, Mum, argue a lot. And as a child, I had quite severe OCD to the point of where you could walk into my bedroom and I would stand at the doorway and I would know if someone had been in the bedroom, and all I needed to do was stand at the doorway. I used to have this tasseled rug, and I would brush the tassels, and the wardrobes, we had all of the built-in wardrobes, every one of them inside was pristine, to the point of where it was like I was raised in the army. It was next level.
And where do you think that stemmed from, that OCD? Was that just trying to control stuff
100%.
that wasn't controllable? Yeah,
100%, absolutely. Like, it's knowing the information I know now, and having gone through therapy and working through Pandora's box, it's really interesting. The version I was before therapy and the version I am now, whilst there's all of the elements of me at my core, I am very different in terms of like self-regulation, being able to self-soothe. These are things that we just weren't taught growing up.
You're right, and I think a lot of us listen to our parents shouting at each other. I think in most relationships, there's elements where the emotion rises, people argue, right? And I think it only comes with awareness and, you know, in growth, where people can actually have those communications less in a heightened state. We are perfectly imperfect, and no matter where we are, at some point we're going to lash out, right? But it's about minimizing that and understanding this emotion, what's this anger, and trying to converse to each other in a empathetic way where we don't kick off, basically. But I'm similar to yourself, you know. I don't think, if I look back, you know, even my nan, beautiful, God rest her soul, love my nan. And she was kind of, you know, she'd be out in ours on a Friday, she'd be ironing everything, all the clothes, your socks, the bed, and the curtain, you moved, she'd iron you. It was like, yeah, she would, but like, shout straight away. It was like from 0 to 100, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? So she's been brought up in that, and I could see that in my mum, and then through to my dad, and then, you know, it passed through to us. But I was kind of, I think I was very conscious as a child, from ages of 6. I was very conscious of, the situation, what's going to go off today. You know, my older brother went through his, you know, terrible teens and rebelled and caused a lot of problems, as what happened, right? And I'm sitting there as a child going, right, and I'm trying to literally say, how can I solve these things before they start, or keep an eye on this? And I was constantly, but I felt like it was so toxic for me as a child, in my energy. And I've kind of worked that out by proxy over the, you know, 20 plus years I've been trying to work on myself. You mentioned there that, you know, you've done a lot of work on yourself, and what did you find during that process? Because I believe you've studied neuroscience, which I wouldn't mind. And what was the reason for you going in that? Is it did it kind of evolve into there because of looking into yourself when you were younger?
Yeah, so over the last, let me just take a step back actually. So when I moved to Australia, so I've been in Australia 16 years this year, so I moved in 2010. So obviously, you know, you're brought up and you study, or you do whatever you do. And then I came to Australia with the view to only stay a year and do my year's working holiday visa. There was never for 1 minute any thought process that I would be here long term. It just wasn't in my, So I'd been in Australia a couple of years, and I started to develop really bad gut problems. So I kind of went on this real journey of trying to understand what was going on, because all of the best gastroenterologists that I'd seen were putting it down to stress. And yes, whilst that might have been the case at the time, I didn't feel stress. So it felt like there was something else going on, and it was kind of like being brushed under the carpet, which I think that's what happens to a lot of people. So I had to go on a self-healing journey. And I know, you know, people go, oh, is it woo-woo? But what I've learned now, there is no woo-woo. Like, science is very much backing this term up that we once used. So long story short, went on a really big journey over a period of 6 years, trying to figure out what was going on, looking at the brain, got access, studying the gut, and just, and that was it, like, just completely deep in that side of things. And then when my dad passed at the end of 2017, that's when things really took another turn. That was probably, at that time, the hardest thing that I'd ever been through to date at that time. And fire away.
Can I ask you, how close to your dad were you?
Really close. I know I mentioned that I was raised by my stepfather, but my dad was, I'm the spit of my dad, so every time I look in the mirror, I see his goddamn face, apart from the 5 o'clock shadow. I'm like, oh, here we go again. He was a really good human. He did boxing when he was younger, so his nickname was Left Right Dynamite. And all that. That's just a little thing that I always love to talk about. He was just a really good human, not a bad bone in his body. He was really well respected. He had lots of friends. He was just a bloody good human. So when he passed, that was literally when it was like, wow. The journey that unfolded after that was quite possibly the hardest thing I've ever been through. And there was no silver bullet, and there was no overnight fix at all.
Did you feel that grief process straight away? What was the grief like for you?
Grief, it's so hard to articulate grief, and I always say that time feels so skewed with grief because it can be a period of time, and whilst you're vocalising it and saying how long it's been, and it could be a decade, and yet it doesn't feel like that. It's so bizarre. But for me, all I knew is at the time I needed to get home to the UK, so I couldn't think about any emotion or what was to unfold. But what did unfold was a real journey being back there with all of my family in his flat. It was a struggle, and I was the one that had written the eulogy and spoke at his funeral. There were hundreds there. It was absolutely beautiful, but it was what hit me afterwards, and then what continued to hit me afterwards. I remember having an experience coming back, and at the time I was living in Port Douglas, and I was driving to my job in Port Douglas, which is far north Queensland, and I called up my friend, and it was like a complete out-of-body experience. I was like, did my dad just die? And she was on the phone going, Dorsey, I need to see you. Yes, he did. I was like, and I was literally, for that moment in time, I felt like I'd dreamt it. It was the most surreal experience. I was like, what's just happened? I don't know what had happened in my brain, but there was some sort of shift. And yes, so what unfolded after that was seeing a therapist, a psychologist, who genuinely changed her and I together, because she always says you did the work, but the both of us changed the direction of my life in so many ways. And I don't even know if she can be mentioned, but she knows who she is, and it's the work and going into the fire was worth every bit of anxiety and sadness and all of the tears and all of the everything, all the uncertainty. Like, it was worth it for me, and the work continues daily.
And what did that? Because a lot of people, I'm kind of been going through the grieving process, and there's no handbook to it, and it's difficult. What did that look like for you? The work that you did, can you describe any elements of that that might be grabbable for anybody out there who may be grieving or going through something that you can maybe help?
Definitely. Well, I was also going through something else with my jaw, so that's a long-winded story, so I won't go into it. But essentially, I ended up with a lot of chronic pain. A lot of that was due to stress. As we know, when the body's, or maybe we don't know, let me just sort of take it back. What happens when you're not processing it, whatever's going on, it tends to come out physically in our bodies.
Can I ask you a kind of question about that? Because I think that's spot on. Because, Paul, you mentioned something about woo-woo before. There's a lot of people out there, I know, people close to me, I'll say something to them and you look at you like you're talking. Yeah, you look like you're talking shit. But actually, genuinely, and you spoke about the jaw, and I wouldn't, because I think you remember you talked to me about that. My jaw locked up.
Yeah.
My jaw locked up. I could feel it. It was because of anger, frustration. I remember when all that, lockdown crap happened, and I had a business and I had to close, and my money wasn't coming in, and I thought it was so unfair, and the relationship wasn't right, and business partner wasn't right, and I had all these things. There was so much unfairness, and I was like this. At the world, and without knowing it, I used to feel like almost like a sensation in my jaw. I would think, and I would feel a sensation, and over time, one day I just went. And I couldn't open my jaw. I was trying to eat. I could eat like this, and I had to do massages and all this type of stuff. But there was so much lack of awareness of what this was, even in the medical industry. I turn up I'm like, who do I go? Doctors, no idea. Googling it. I go to a dentist thinking, okay, jaw. They're saying I'm gonna have to drill a hole in your jaw. I'm saying no. I can feel the sensation when I think that physical feeling here, and it's locking. And they look at me in the medical profession like I've got two heads, like I'm talking shit.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know what's happening because I can feel it. It's from what I'm thinking is causing this physical thing. Is there science to back that up?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I ended up going down the road I went down with studying things like that because of Dr. Joe Dispenza, who obviously a lot of people know who he is now, but before, a lot of people knew who he is, I'd sort of found him, and I've been following him for way over a decade, and the work that he's done is absolutely phenomenal. So you can't deny this sort of stuff, because we know that we've got all of the data to back these things up. You know, you can put someone on a machine, and we're able to tell what's going on in their brain and understand, you know, the activity and things like that. Like, it just can't be denied. Like, there's way too much information for us to be ignorant and go, I don't believe that. But also, we also have to appreciate that that's the opinion of others as well. But I've seen too much, and I know too much from my own experience and what I went through, and how I then had to look at anxiety and look at stress and look at pain. And when I changed my relationship with it, everything changed. And it sounds so simple. It's not as simple as that. It's doing the tool. It's having the tools. It's being consistent every day. It's being diligent. It's learning to, and I say learning to like yourself if you're someone that, you know, has felt unworthy in the past, rather than love yourself, because that's a process in itself. Learning to like yourself first, enough to do the work and say, I'm worthy of more and I deserve more. But even that's a process.
You know, there's that old saying about, you know, you've got to guard the thoughts at your own gates, right?
Yeah.
You think you've got to guard what's coming in. And I think a lot of people still in this day and age, for whatever reason, aren't aware that you are not your thoughts. The thoughts are coming in and you're sitting there, and when you're allowing yourself to think all this negative stuff, you're just poisoning your body. You're pumping all kinds of shit around you. It will come out in the physical disease. That's what disease is.
Yeah.
And why do you think that the medical profession, what's going on in the medical profession, why is this not being taught? Why is this not, again, I go back to me going to doctors and they just got no idea. And I think it's all out there, you know, and it's like, we're all, as humanity, we're learning by ourselves. We're going back to basics. All the stuff that we would have been taught by our elders when we were younger. We're learning all this stuff. You know, there's none of those elders kind of coaching us and, hey, you know, look after yourself this way or do that way. Why do you think that is?
That's a really good question, and I don't really have a definitive answer for that. But I think there's probably a lot of ignorance, maybe a lot of ego, the willingness not to be open-minded. But also, when you're medically trained, you work within a certain set of parameters, and if you go to have your bloods taken because you're not feeling right and it doesn't fit within those parameters, but you're still not feeling right, it's kind of like, well, everything here in black and white says that everything's fine, so sort of on your way. But again, I know through going on my own journey of, you know, food and herbs and having regular acupuncture, it's been a game changer for me. And it's not one fits all. You have to find your own method and your own way of doing things. I've recently fallen in love with Qigong, so I'm on like a 24-day practice of Qigong. I'm doing it with my acupuncturist, Helena at Chi House, and I just have to shout out for her because I've been on a right journey these last few months, and she has brought me back into balance, and I really mean that. You know, it's about finding what works for you as an individual. I've just taken things from other people or other methods and kind of made it my own, and that's. But again, we're always learning and changing things.
Because it's like, I think you touched on there, but there's like ego to take that other opinion, but I think it's systematic. It's above, because it's like people are trained, they go to medical school and they learn certain things.
Yeah.
I think it's outdated.
It is.
For want of a better thing. It's like our schooling system's outdated.
Massively.
And how we teach our children, and, you know, why aren't we teaching children about, you know, about emotional stuff and some of the beautiful stuff you're doing at the moment. You're going to schools and preschool and doing, you know, sound bowls and all this type of stuff, which is unbelievable, right? And teaching them, and you're talking to them about emotions and stuff. Now, imagine if we had children who, I always say, imagine if we had children who were learning about these from an early age, because I always say, once the light bulb comes on, it can't go away. Once you learn something, it's learned. It stays with you. But I think that the medical industry's got to change, because it's out there, and it's almost like it just it's doing it without it. You know what I mean? Humanity's learning. Everyone's going, you're talking shit.
Yeah.
Because I think with social media and stuff, and everybody's doing their own thing. But for some reason, yeah, it bamboozles me sometimes. And that's why I think there's a bit of a thing, and a negative kind of connotation towards doctors and stuff nowadays. You know, you look there and you turn up and they're literally looking at Google as you're talking to them and say, "Oh, I think it's this." And you're like, "Fucking hell, yeah, I could do that."
It is, but I mean, listen, I adore and love my GP. You know, he will quite happily hold his hands up and say, "Right, Dorsey, it's time you go to one of your Herbie friends because this is where I'm done now." And he's a wonderful, wonderful man. He's very, very methodical. I'll be gutted when he retires. But it's having somebody that can actually say, over to you now. Like, because I had some problems with my thyroid postpartum with my second child, and it was tipping towards underactive, which is what happens to a lot of women. And I said to him, I said, you know what? I'm not going to go on medication. I said, because I'm telling you now, in about 4 weeks' time, when I come back and we do the test and we redo it, it will be back to normal. And he was like, if that's what you want to do, absolutely. And he kind of let me go with that. You know, there was a respect there. And lo and behold, 4 weeks of infrared saunas and Brazil nuts and a few other things from my good friend, a clinical nutritionist, who provided some great foods for my thyroid. It came back down and it leveled out. But the thyroid is a fickle organ anyway, so it does change. But it's just an example.
Yeah, but it just goes to show you didn't take the pills. Sometimes the pills don't last forever and a day. You have pills, that's what leads to more depression and all of these, things.
Yeah.
I've got a friend of mine who, he's not in a good space, really bad space. But he's been diagnosed with a certain illness and. Or kind of mental illness, and he's like, no, that's it, I am that illness. He's like associated himself with that, takes these pills. Now I've watched him just decline. He's not the same human being anymore. His eyes are gone, he's glazed, he's slow, he hasn't got energy. He had a lot of spark's gone, flatlined. But he's addicted to he's just like, this is the thing. And I'm like, well, when does this stop? Is there an end game? There's no end game to it. And it's like, so that's what I would recommend. What is the other thing? And we are what we eat, right? And let's look at this, what's going on inside our body. So I'm glad you've found your way. And I'm looking at some of the things you've touched on. You've had that upbringing of, dealing with a space that didn't feel safe as a child. What arguments are going off here and there. You're always kind of under there. Obviously, later on in life, you've come across here to Sydney. Your dad's passed away, and I know what that's like. That's really difficult. You've had to go back. You've had postpartum depression. Did you say?
Postpartum anxiety.
Yeah.
And, a lot of women go through so much, but before I actually go into that, because it'll probably lead to man shift, is that this is how powerful the brain is. So Anthony Hopkins, I'm sure you know of him, is one of the most iconic actors.
A legend, yeah.
Is phenomenal. He did a movie called The Father, and in The Father, he was playing a father with dementia. And every night, he would go back to his hotel room or wherever he was staying after filming, and he would sit with himself in a quiet space, and he would talk to his brain. And he would say, this isn't real. This is just a film that we are making, because that's how powerful it is, the brain. Whatever you tell it, it believes. So every night, this is an actor going back to his hotel room. He's playing a dementia patient, and he's like, this isn't real, brain. This is just a part I'm playing. Because obviously he's stepping into a dementia patient role, or, learning that of what dementia patients potentially go through.
And he didn't want to let that soak in him and become that.
Yeah.
It's over those method actors, right? And then they kind of, some of them can kind of really get attached to that character. No, it's really interesting thought process. He was like, I don't want any of that.
Well, that's it. No, it's just, the brain is so powerful. And once upon a time, we thought it was like a computer system, and over time it just deteriorates, But now we know it's malleable, and we can create new neural pathways, and it's phenomenal, the amount of information that's out there. But also on the other side of that, there is a lot of information out there, and that can also be overwhelming.
Of course.
So where do you start?
Of course. I mean, that's kind of why I do what I do, because
Yeah.
there is so much stuff out there. I talk about good men helping good men, or the kind of corporate side, or the other stuff that we do with the Artistry of Humanity. We're trying to condense everything to make it simple for people, because it's so fucking overwhelming. Where do I go?
Yeah.
That podcast sounded great, but that was deep.
Yeah.
That's another thing I've got to learn
Yeah.
about.
Well,
Fucking
it
hell,
is.
what
It
else?
just becomes so overwhelming.
It is, and I think it's got to be simplified. Hence, we do what we do. Okay. So, it really kind of diverse childhood, diverse upbringing. You've had your time over in Sydney. I didn't talk about your later years. So, if you came over when you're 2017, just if you just fill that gap. You said when you were younger, just before you came across here. What made you come across to Australia? What were you doing before you came over?
So I came over in 2010.
2010, sorry.
2010, yeah. I think I touched on my dad 2017.
That's right.
And at the time, I'd split up with my then boyfriend, and I always wanted to travel. I was partying. I was just on that scene. Was a flight controller, and I'd done lots of different, I guess, little things on the side, like volunteer work. And, at the time I was 23, 24, so I'm still, relatively young, doing lots of different things and finding my way. And the partying was great, but I was always someone that enjoyed something for a short period of time and then wanted to move on to the next thing. I'm not someone that has an addictive personality, which is probably good for someone that used to enjoy partying. But I wouldn't have changed it. Like, it was before social media, and I just feel like that is such a privilege to have been clubbing in Manchester and Leeds and Liverpool, where you're from, and have no social media. I'd definitely be in jail now. 100%. 100% from some crazy thing that I did, and it's posted all over social media, an absolute...
I think we all would be.
Oh, God. So it was just amazing, and coming over to Sydney... it wasn't even like a new start or anything like that. I came here and I loved Manchester, so I wasn't even coming here to get away from, the place that I'm from. And things just tend to happen in the most wonderful way. But I was actually gifted a book so I worked in the music industry. I got sponsored in the music industry after being here for a couple of years at Aperamcos, which I absolutely loved. And I'd been gifted a book from a friend of mine. It was called Happy for No Reason. And it was by an author called Marcia Shimoff. And she did Chicken Soup for the Soul. I hope I pronounced her name correctly. And that was a game changer for me. And that was given to me in 2011. And it was about being happy for no reason. But it's a lot, there's a lot more context to it than that. And that was the start of self-discovery. I'd always been pretty spiritual growing up, to be fair, but in my own kooky way. But that was just trying to understand that and going, hang on, so why does it feel like we're always waiting to be happy when? I'll be happy when I get that car. I'll be happy when I get that job. I'll be happy when. So when are we going to be happy? Because the goalpost is always changing.
That's the trick, isn't it? That's out there.
Yeah.
The trick of the matrix, or whatever you want to call it. And the majority of people are tied up in that.
Yeah.
The majority, I would say 80 to 90% of people, because even with the awareness, you're still tied up in it because you're aware of it, but you're only aware of it for like 2% of the day. And you go, fuck, I've done it again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've got to, when I do this event, I'm going to be walking over the moon. What about, all this other time?
That's it.
That's just, at what point did you enjoy it? For a minute? Is it 60 seconds? Is it 10 minutes?
Yeah.
When are you going to enjoy it? I go back to when I was starting up the other business I had. The events business type thing. So I remember thinking about it for it was like 18 months in the making. We're going to get the venue, and it was just graft, hard work, doing things. And I come out of being a senior in a large corporate organisation, had a lot of team, to like me and a business partner. So we were doing everything. So, and I was doing all the stuff I don't like, admin-y crap, and all the stuff. Not saying admin's crap, I'm just saying stuff that doesn't work well for me. Doesn't, my brain doesn't adjust to it too well. So I was thinking, I'm going to do all this stuff, and we're going to get this thing. And I remember, like, on the night, it went off. It was fantastic when we'd opened up. I remember looking at queues down the line to get in. And I was like, this is amazing. And literally about an hour later, I was like, is that it? What
Yeah.
now?
The dopamine.
I was like, what now?
And then it's gone.
And I was like, oh, this is what all these fuckers talk about again. But still, as you say, you're aware of it, but you've got to be constantly aware. And that's where I think journaling and gratitude and all of these things come into play, that again, people think, oh, what's that? It's only when you do it, you realize, oh, I understand the value of this now. That's why like meditation, breath work, journaling, all inner work is the thing that brings the awareness. Because if you don't do the inner work, you're constantly doing the external stuff, which is the matrix, which keeps you away from who you are. And whatever's going on in that day, if it's a good day, you're going to have a good day. If you get a win, you think it's fucking great for that 60 seconds. If it's a bad day, it's constantly bad, because even in your good day, there's a part of it where you're asleep effectively. And that's why I don't think people understand the value of inner work. What's your thought?
Very much aligned. I think and again, this is just my personal experience, what I've learned, and I'd say last year, hands down, was my hardest year. Obviously, after my dad. So last year, I dealt with my dad. I'd gone through all of the work that I did. But last year, I was adjusting to becoming a mother of two, although my son was born in 2024. But, he was getting to an age where he was sort of, 7 or 8 months. And my daughter's, there's 2 years difference between them. So essentially, you've got, 2 babies under 2 at the beginning. And it was just a lot. I didn't really know where I belonged. I felt quite lost. I was working on all these amazing things, and as an outsider, people would be like, oh my God, look at all of this, like, she's working on, it's so cool. But I think that is the reality of life. Like, we go through so many different things, and healing isn't linear. Like, you'll have like, a good few weeks, and that is life. And it's kind of, how do you ensure that you can keep as much balance as possible? And that is, try not to see everything as either good or bad, because it kind of is what it is. And it's kind of, yes, it's amazing, celebrate it. But if you're going through something bad, that's going to change. And if you're going through something good, that's also going to change. So it's being okay with that and being able to ride the waves. And that was probably hands down the biggest lesson that I learned last year at the age of 40 with 2 children. And it was just huge for me, really, really huge. So you're always doing something, and then you might need to tweak what you're doing in terms of, like, Reformer for me. I was back at Reformer doing it 3 times a week. I was meditating. I was writing in a diary, not necessarily journaling as such, but just because I think there is a perception, and people go, oh, journaling, do you need to be in a robe and sat at the top of a mountain? Absolutely not. It's simply just getting your thoughts out your head. This is how I'm feeling. And then in a few days, you can look back at it and go, the clouds have parted, or probably need to do a few things a little bit different here because I'm still feeling.
Yeah, it's because people understand, if I have ideas in the night, I'll write it down. I'll have a pen and paper next to my bed because I can sleep. It's literally, you get it out your head, because it's like your head goes, oh, you've got it.
Yeah.
You've got it, mate. I use my phone. I put it on my phone, wake up with all kinds of gobbledygook on my phone because I fucking typed it in 3 a.m. It's like, what was I typing in there? But I can then sleep.
Speaking into it,
but I can sleep because otherwise it's there.
Yeah.
And effectively, that's a form of journaling. It just it is what it is. So people sometimes do it, but I think for some reason there's some kind of stigma attached to it, with especially with men.
Yeah. Yes.
So, you've learnt a lot. You've pushed yourself with all of your kind of pains, like we all have.
Yeah.
You've then pushed yourself into understanding and studying the neuroscience behind a lot of the stuff. You've helped heal yourself.
Yeah.
You work with women. You do sound healing, breath work, all of this stuff. But you've created something for men.
Yes.
Why is that? What's brought you here?
So, just a very quick back step. I am also a massive advocate for women, and women go through an awful lot, certainly postpartum, when we go through pregnancy, and then at that postpartum stage, we're not really taught what to expect, and that is the hardest part of pregnancy, or that's certainly what I believe, and many of other women that I've spoken to. So on the other side of that, just as we go into the man's event, so you've got men that on the outside looking at their partner that have, whether it's a C-section or they've given birth, they've been cut open, or, they've given birth and they've gone through 9 months and all these changes. And what happens to a man is or can feel like the outsider looking in, doesn't know really where he belongs, but also, is there room for my feelings? Because this is my amazing partner, my beautiful wife or girlfriend that has just gone through all of this. She's been cut open. There's not room for me, and I don't want to burden her with that. And that's what happens to a lot of men.
Wow, yeah, it's a good point.
It is, and they don't know where they belong. They can see mother and baby bonding. And again, that's not always the case. It takes time. But, as a general rule of thumb, women, we go through the motions and we can feel this baby growing. And again, the man's the outsider looking in and going, oh, and it can also be, if you're in a same-sex relationship, there's one that's carrying and there's, a woman, even though, emotionally we are wired different, it can happen to even, men that are wanting to have a child and they're looking at their surrogate. There's loads of different dynamics, so it's not just necessarily, heterosexual.
Just the person who's going through the pregnancy
so
and the other person who isn't.
Yeah, so many.
It makes sense.
It does. So Millie and I, who is my partner, and we do, not my sexual partner, but she's my well-being sister, and we do events together. And we started off last year and we did 3 and we sold out, and that was absolutely amazing. And then we had an idea to do a men's event. And it kind of really just took off from there. And we were like, okay, so what is the reality of getting men into a yoga studio? Probably very little. And that is, again, the reality of it, because, and we wanted to appeal to the masses. So long story short, and it really is going to be a long story short, is that it kind of just seemed to snowball in this positive way, and we were meeting people, and then I was at a networking event, and I came back to Millie and I said, let's do it on a stadium. And then it kind of just went from there. And then Millie's, got her ideas, and we kind of just both like, wow, okay, how do we do this and how do we do that? So after 12 months in the making, we go live on the 15th of March. And we've got yourself, and I have to do a shout out. We've got Dean Gladstone, who is an absolute expert in breathwork, the original, the OG, and his amazing partner, Katie. They've got the power of breath. Paul Peterson, who is an absolute legend when it comes to sound. He has breath and sound, and he's going to be DJing for the day. Really cool ambient tunes. We've got Stephen Gamble, founder of Mananka. He's phenomenal in the space that he's in. He's done talks at the Australian Police Force and the like. We're just very lucky to have all of these amazing people. Last but not least, yourself.
And why did you... So, first of all, that was a really good thing, which I hadn't really considered, because I haven't been a father, right? My missus has some children, and I love them dearly, but I haven't been through that process.
Yeah.
So that's a really important point that a lot of men would probably, maybe just talking about men here, a lot of men are going to be really struggling through that whole process. And I never thought about that, because you would look at your partner going through it, really difficult, painful, stressed out, lack of sleep, and you're thinking, fucking hell, but when we suppress our feelings, no matter what, it affects us, because it goes down the feeling. It's an emotion. It goes somewhere, and that's where you get affected. So I think that's a really interesting point, and that's, I assume, part of the passion is what else is being the driver behind the men's thing? Was it just, did it birth from there, or has it come, pardon the pun? but
I love that.
But has it come from anywhere else?
No, it came from. So just before I sort of say that, I just actually want to say Jake Stringer, who's the face and ambassador of the event, he's come on board, and we are in partnership with Sydney Showground and the NG Stadium, and without them, this event wouldn't 100%. Be possible at this scale. So we're so grateful. But some years ago, I wanted to do my yoga training, and and I wanted to focus on men, so men that do Ironman or ultra marathons, because I felt like there was a gap in the market, because they were doing all of this training, this physical training, but they weren't doing anything that was helping with their recovery. Yes, you can take the creatine and the magnesium and stretch and all of that, but yoga, it allows you to go inward as well. So my partner, he's done ultra marathons in the past, and I'm telling you now, from what I've seen, that is mind. Physical, it's great, you train, happy days, but if your mind tells you halfway through an ultra marathon that you can't do it anymore, your body will stop.
Wow.
So that's kind of the angle I was going down. And then if I go back a few steps to my dad, and it's a little bit uncomfortable talking about it, but after he passed away, I found out that in those last few years, he was just fed up with what was going on with his health and ended up really trying to just drink and smoke himself to death because it was too much, the anxiety that came with not being able to breathe and everything else. And that was really hard for me. That was really tough, and especially because I'd lived so far away. And I just thought, if I lived closer, would I have noticed that? Would I have seen that? But all the work came after that, and I didn't even know half the stuff that I know now. And it's so frustrating because I just think, God, I could have helped. But these things happen, and that's the road that it took me down. And that's, again, and Millie, she's passionate about mental well-being as a whole. And so with this event, it was looking at men and realising that they don't have a space to necessarily go to. Yes, whilst we can do breath work and things like that, which is absolutely amazing, but there's nothing really dedicated as such like this on this scale. And I just thought, how good would it be to have a community of men and for this to potentially be an annual thing where it keeps going. And then obviously we're working with you on what happens post-event, which is absolutely quite possibly one of the most important parts of the event, is what happens afterwards. Men go through so much and they don't talk like women. We can have a natter over a cup of coffee or a glass of wine. We're more open to talking. And I don't want to generalise here, but again, that's the reality. And if you look at the stats and suicide and men, it's got to change. It's bottom line, and something needs to happen. So this is, I guess, mine and Millie's, but our very small percentage of trying to help with that and bringing these amazing facilitators together and people to change that.
Oh, well, that's beautiful. Beautiful. So you're using, some of the pain and upsets and things that have gone on in your life, and you're using it to drive you forward, arrow forward.
The tattoo from 2013. Big up Blakely Massive, the tattoo parlour.
No, and I think that's a really good point. What I like about when you spoke to me about your event was you were really passionate about this not just being a tick box. You were passionate about it not just being, okay, we're going to show up and people are going to feel good on the day. You were really interested, how can we make this a really impactful event that people go away with and they've got tools and actions and community, and it's going to be ongoing. And I felt that straight away, and obviously collectively all the people we've got together, we're going to make that happen.
Well, definitely. And then if we think about just very quickly what happens post-event, you've created a Good Men Helping Good Men app, which is phenomenal. And every time I speak about it to people, they're like, I can't believe this exists. This is absolutely amazing. And to be able to align with that and align with all of the facilitators, and obviously Jake and everybody that's part of this event. But also, just very quickly, I sat and reflected on this. You've got the facilitators, but it's more than just that. It's the people along the way that have introduced you to someone else, And by the way, we've got loads of great sponsors for the goodie bags, but that's not coming out until next week, so I'm going to keep that stum. But thanks for those coming on board, because without you, like, it's just wouldn't be as good a as event as it's gonna be. But there's so many people that have made this event that probably don't even know. It's more than just who you see. Like, it's everything that goes on behind the scenes, the conversations you're having. Like, it's everything that leads you
Universe
up.
just nudging people
Well, it
in and
is.
around
It
you.
is.
Is it?
It's
Is it?
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like, it is. It is.
Feels like that. Well, I think that's a good time to kind of start bringing it to a close.
Yeah.
One thing I like to ask is, we're talking about men, but it could be men or women. Anybody. There's a lot of people struggling out there.
Yeah.
You spoke about the statistics. I talk about it all the time. Mental health crisis, loneliness epidemic, technology is destroying people's brains. You talk about neuroscience, people's brains.
Yeah.
The scans that show what the fucking phone is doing to our children.
Yeah.
Everyone's suffering. Anxiety going through the roof and all that. What would one thing that you would say to anybody who is struggling out there? Any kind of could be of any age, but specifically our next wave of adults, who come through that teenager into adulthood, who are struggling like mad. What piece of advice would you give to any of them who are struggling at the moment?
Do you know, it's not advice as such, but it's the main thing that will help, and that is talk to someone, tell someone how you're feeling, because that's when the work can happen. It's when you're bottling it up and you just don't know which way to turn, and you never know that person that you speak out to can literally have this massive impact in your life on helping you navigate through whatever needs to be navigated, by introducing you to someone else, or mentioning a great psychologist. Or it's, the journey is so individual, and again, it's not one fits all, but just tell somebody how you're feeling.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for putting the amazing stadium event at Sydney Showground Shift together. We're very, very happy about that. Amazing group of people. Thanks for your passion around all well-being, but specifically us lumps, us men, who sometimes don't look after ourselves very well, don't know how to talk up. So events like this, and the fact coming from, yourself and Millie, I think it's really important that women look after us men and men look after us women, because we're all human beings. We've got to look after each other. So
we do, but what about the stuff that you're doing as well?
Oh no, well, I harp on about that and as much. Everyone will be bored of that by now. But no, really, really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on, and I look forward to doing some amazing stuff with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Cheers, Dorsey.